Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 49 of the Titanforge Podcast. My name is Ratnos, joined by my friend Tettles.
Yo, what's up?
And my friend Trell.
Good afternoon.
Recently returned to streaming over at TTV Trelsky. So go
That's true.
Hit him with a follow if you're new to the podcast. You've joined since he went on his stream hiatus. Recently conquered a Waycrest Manor, I understand.
Oh yeah, I guess so. It was pretty scuffed, but yeah, 24 Waker.
Congratulations.
Well, it was only scuffed once you turbo fed the Gloom Horrors.
We've all been
it turns
there.
out 7 Gloom Horrors and 1 Mark Sister is pretty tough.
Okay, straight up. If you're going to pull all 7 Gloom Horrors, make sure you're going to live to all 7 of them and do not... that pack and the pack after the first boss in Motherload, I've seen so many deaths accumulate so fast on because it's really easy to wipe and then just turbo feed to it.
Nobody intended on pulling the Mark Sister. I can live the 7 Gloom Horrors. That's why we were going to do that. But yeah, she pulled, and she does half the tank's health every time she does her magic damage strike. So it's just doom.
Yeah, it's actually kind of tough this week as well with Volcanic, because you have somebody standing in a spot to bait Volcanic, or to bait the horrors to not jumping, and then there's just 30 volcanoes under their feet.
It's the same with the Ataldazar snaps. On Volcanic Week, I would almost generally recommend doing the reverse Ataldazar snap, where you have the tank in the snap spot and then the healer / DPS in the other ledge, just to make sure that they're not going out Volcanic, rather they can dodge it. It's a little bit easier that way.
Yeah. All in all, though, pretty great week for Mythic Plus, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, but it is kind of a fantastic week for people to be doing keys. We've seen some world first 27s of various dungeons done. Tourgas earlier today even taken out at 27 by Nerf Tank and Yoda and the gang. I feel like 28 Junkyard is also possible if they can roll that key.
28 Toll also looked timeable.
Yeah.
They were 2.5 minutes under.
Yeah, so 10% more health and damage. They were less than 10% of the time or under, right?
2.5 minutes is a lot.
It is quite a lot, yeah.
Even then, yeah, they'll get faster as the week goes. That was on a Wednesday, so they have 5 more days to perfect routes, and then someone will do a 28 for sure.
The problem with the 28s is that you have to get a 27 that is timeable to get a 28 key. So only 1/6
Storm, Junkyard, Tourgas.
Yeah, they were in a Shrine of the Storm 27, and then they were in a Shrine of the Storm 26, and then they were in a Shrine of the Storm 25.
Okay, well, Shrine of the Storm 27 is timeable.
Yeah.
And they missed a Taldazar 27 by 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, that was another really close one that looked very doable. So yeah, there a lot of the 27s look possible, but the thing is that half of them aren't, right? You get a 27 King's Rush or whatever, that keystone is getting dropped down to 25 before it's possible to time it. So half of the 27s are maybe either really hard or quite hard, or impossible. And then the other half, only a couple of them are reliably timeable for those groups. So the 28s are so, you have to time a 26 and then a 27 to get a 28, which has a 2 in 12 chance of being Junkyard or Tourgas. So it's definitely teams will give themselves a chance of timing 28s this week, but I don't think it's a guaranteed thing because of how many different RNG events there are along the way.
I believe that a 28 will be timed, but like you said, the delta between some keys that are timeable on a 25 versus timeable on a 28 are pretty high right now.
Yeah.
This is the first season where people are doing consistently higher than 25s across the board, though. I think in previous seasons, 25 Waycrest or 25 Atal was the cap. Maybe there's a 26 Atal, but most not just were at 25 as the cap.
Well, they slammed through a 53% modifier on the season. We were wondering whether or not that would be too much or not.
Turns out corruption is a hell of a drug.
Even more powerful, yeah.
Insane.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about this week. We have a new interview between Preach and Morgan Day, who is a encounter designer at Blizzard, a lead encounter designer even. So some cool stuff in that interview between Preach and that person from Blizzard that we will talk about as part of our topic. We'll also recap what happened in the MDI and actually another dungeon race that happened on Shadowlands Alpha earlier today. And then our kind of theory topic this week we're going to talk about is how to use your cooldowns. So in Mythic Plus, like planning out when to use offensive and defensive cooldowns, both pugging and with coordinated groups. Just some general, heuristics to do better with that and to avoid some common mistakes that people make with those sorts of cooldowns. So that is the topic. On the scheduling note, next week we are going back to our previous schedule, our non-MDI schedule. So Saturday the 23rd in 10 days will be the next day that we record the show. And Sunday the 24th will be when it comes out on YouTube and, Spotify and iTunes and everything. And we'll then stick to weekly on Saturdays going after that. Also, next week will be our show's 1-year anniversary. So Tettles has baked up a giveaway potentially happening between now and then. Do you want to tell us some more of what that might look like, Tettles?
It's going to be on our Twitter, so make sure you guys are following the Titanforge WoW Twitter, at Titanforge WoW. Basically, it's probably going to run for a week. It will most likely start on the 18th, which will actually be our show's 1-year anniversary. Beyond that, it'll probably end up running for a week, so it'll overlap with the next show. We'll be able to announce more of it then. As for what we're giving away, that's still a little bit TBD. Dratnus and I and Trell have to discuss a little bit more, but we're going to be giving away probably like some Shadowlands giveaway, some game time, stuff like that.
Alpha keys?
I don't believe that we have access to that. Thanks, though.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can give those away except for Mr. Blizzard.
I just want.
Yes, yeah.
Still.
All right, let us thank our supporters over at patreon.com for supporting us. Some of them for pretty much since we launched the Patreon, which I guess was a little bit less or more than a year or less than a year ago, but still.
We were 10 episodes in.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah. Trell, you want to read them off this week?
Yeah, sure. All right, big shout out and thanks to Paul of US Proudmore, King of Skills, VTech XD, Zuku, Jaw, Drunk Swede from Legion of Lemmings, Argent Dawn EU. Man, that's a mouthful. I wish I was Dratnos Dino Pillow. Thanks, Tettles, Heltari, Ishio, Andrew Number 1, Chromed, Seraphicus, Trekkie, The Marsh Hare, Regulus, Never Nude, Chewy, Say Lama Atrelanore, Pelion, who ran out of jokes for this segment, Coke Dogs Gopher, Wargmonk Win, Dratnos main basement captive alongside his Dino Pillow, Rayton and his co-tank Orphe, the Yikes guy from the guild, quote unquote. I get food buff for death skips. Dude, these names are getting out of hand.
Oh, yes.
Can we call Samrek the Fear Dude Scary Joe instead? That's one name. LXIX literally only wants one thing and it's disgusting. That stands for 69. A time 20 key. Salty Sunny. Das Boot, 7th best mage in the guild. Papa Dratnos made me pull Dino Pack. Thank you, everyone.
Dino Pack is good, by the way. It's good. That's a good pull. We like the Dino Pack.
It is a good pull. I agree. Maybe not a bursting, but it is a good pull normally.
Yeah, especially on Tyrannical weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Bingo.
Okay. Good job, Charlie. Did a great job there of reading those names out. So let's talk about our first kind of mini topic here. Our first of many things we'll talk about. The MDI that happened last weekend was the final EU Cup of the season, and the winners were not Method EU. They were Perplexed. So Perplexed upset Method EU and took home the win in that cup, and it was really cool to see, actually, that upset.
Would you say that surprised you?
Yeah. I mean, okay, like, if you'd asked me before, I guess if you played Perplexed against Method EU in like 6 best of 3s, do I think they would have won one of them or more? Probably, yeah. But given that they'd lost 5 in a row, winning that last one was a surprise, yeah.
I was gonna say they've come close so many times. I would have definitely expected one of those to come through for them, and finally did, which I'm sure makes them feel very proud of themselves.
Yeah, they really have been stepping up this season. And actually, I think Deplete from Beyond also deserve a big shout out for really stepping up to that. Like, at the start of the MDI season in EU, if you watch that first cup, they looked like a different team, and they really have gotten up to that, like, close to that Method EU perplexed tier. Then after that, a couple other there was a close scrum for the last couple invite spots between the boys, Self-Reliance, and Paint for Femme. Ended up going to the boys out of those three after a tiebreaker match against Self-Reliance. And Tettles, that was a nice close match that you and I got to cast. What were your thoughts about the boys versus Self-Reliance matchup?
Well, as you said, Dratnos, after the fact, the more Fiesta the match becomes, the happier I get. And that was one that Dratnos ended the match very happy.
Dude, it was the boys just like weekly no levered each of their keys. They pulled one pack at a time and just let Self-Reliance wipe themselves out in each dungeon. I have no idea. I can't explain why that happened and why it worked, but that's what happened. And so the boys are going to the global finals. Honestly, though, Self-Reliance and Paint for Femme have had some very impressive moments in that tournament too. So I'm, the entire EU Cup was very strong.
Dude, okay, I don't get Self-Reliance at all. They were significantly more consistent all weekend, and then whenever they play versus the boys, they actually just choked so hard it's insane.
Yeah, I didn't understand it. Let us move on, though.
Maybe they just had a bad match. I don't know.
Yeah,
it could be one of many things, right?
Yeah, it does happen. It does happen, and I don't know. I mean, like, it's tough out there as well because, like, sometimes you have some maps that you're way better on than others, and like, one series you're playing on 3 of your good maps, and the next one you're playing on 3 of your weaker maps, and you look like a pretty different team if that's the case as well. Speaking of maps that were good versus maps that were bad, Junkyard in the EU Cup was just a complete disaster in 2 different runs. Complete disaster.
So EU had like a form to their madness for how they were banning the whole entire time. They would just ban maps that they hadn't practiced, and there was like a silent rule where if you see a Tourgas, you see a Junkyard, you see a Siege of Borealis, you see all those, like, basically those 3 were almost permaban the whole entire time. Junkyard, Siege of Borealis, and Tourgas. And then it's like this weekend, nah, fuck it, we're just gonna ban like this random Waycrest Manor. Oh, fuck it, we're just gonna ban Shrine of the Storm kind of sucked, but like they were just banning random shit this weekend. Like,
they didn't ban Junkyards. Like, they banned like 0 Junkyards, and it was
like, Rest, which is a time trial map, and like a Tourgas, which is also a time trial map. And you sit there and you look at it, you're like, what the fuck are they doing? And then they played this Junkyard as a Fiesta, and you're like,
there were like so the top times in Junkyard were like, let me just give you what some of the Junkyard times that weekend were. Like 13 minutes, 14 minutes, 15, 50, 25, 26, 28 were from those runs where they were just like chain feeding to the last boss. Like there was a team that like pulled the last boss with 4 obelisks, wiped. Pulled the last boss with 4 obelisks, wiped again. Killed an obelisk. Pulled the last boss with 3 obelisks, wiped. Killed another obelisk.
Okay.
Pulled the boss with 2 obelisks, wiped again, and lost the match at that point because the other team had been having equally as many problems and finally could kill the boss.
I was sitting there watching on break. I don't remember what match it was, but Dratnos, I think, was casting with Nagura, and he's sitting there giggling his head off as they're just power feeding to the fucking last boss, and he's like, "Oh no, man!" This is just wiping. Then somebody like they full wiped on the gauntlet after they faced the boss the first time, and Dratnos is
no!
Dratnos
I saw it,
is
actually
fucking dying.
I couldn't, man. It was
right before that. You're like, "There's no way they wipe on this part," and then they actually wipe.
And it wasn't like the 7th and 8th seed teams that were doing this. It was like three out of 4 of the teams. Yeah,
Perplex for Self-Reliance or some shit.
It was like, it was good teams that, had been here for many weeks and had been playing the MDI, and just, it was so good to watch. Yeah. But Tettles after the fact is telling me, he's like, yeah, you hate to see bad teams mess up dungeons, but you love to see good teams mess up dungeons. And that is absolutely true.
That's true.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's like, I don't really want to flame bad teams, especially since they put in a ton of time and they're probably just having an unlucky run. Whenever a good team is just about to fucking fiesta with another team in the same dungeon, I find that really funny because I could laugh at them, kind of.
Yeah,
it's like Keck Wing a streamer whenever he dies to some random shit in a 26. It's like, okay, yeah, it's kind of funny.
In Junkyard, we did see some actual innovation, though, that was good, in addition to some bad stuff. There's a cool spot that you guys can maybe yoink in your live keys as well. So this is in, like, the corner of the Trixie and Nano room. Let me full screen this, actually. Is you can pull, so if you're looking here at the Self-Reliance, the left side here, you can, like, pull Trixie and Nano back here next to where they spawn in this little garage side bit, to the left of where they spawn, I guess to the right when you're looking at them. And you can't get hit by the motorcycle here. The motorcycle doesn't have a path to get here.
So you want to know the actual reason that they tanked the boss there?
Why?
The real reason that they tanked the boss there is because whenever the motorcycle will charge up, there's like trash on the right-hand side of the room that they haven't pulled yet. Mm-hmm. And the motorcycle will go over there unless you tank him in the spot, in which case he has a more predictable...
but you also don't have to dodge the motorcycle. You do have to dodge, like you have a small space to dodge grenades, but it's, You have a very tight space to dodge those grenades because they're pulling it with the trash pack, and the bolt buster can be kind of dangerous. But the reason that they're doing that is, like, I don't think it's a superior strategy for live. Yeah, maybe it might be a useful place to go. I don't know. It's a useful place to know about.
Yeah, sure.
It might be the play for like doing that 5-pack optimally. Like the timer's not tight in Junkyard, so you don't have to optimize it too much. But I think the blasters can't pat far away from that spot.
Oh yes. Sense. So maybe if you pull the 5-pack into this corner before pulling the boss or something.
Yeah, I mean, I just noticed like the blaster's movement is kind of random, and I think that prevents or helps prevent them from moving too far out of the pack. So it helps.
I was referring to the boss. The trash pack is kind of whatever. Like, where does the smoke go? Like the exhaust from Nano. Like, are you able to?
Not there.
It's out in the middle of the room, right? Yeah. So what are you gonna do about the Mega Tase if you don't have meld? Like these guys are melding it, but
there might be a line spot right there.
Yeah.
Can you line it?
I would assume so, because like the cloud is just line of sight, right? It's just a smoke bomb.
It's a smoke bomb.
I assumed it was something more, but maybe you're right.
Yeah, I mean, you can vanish it and
actually
stuff.
Test it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's a good call.
Warrants further testing, let's say.
Yeah, I would say with that.
All right, then another thing we saw in the MDI was from our second place team, our runners-up, a 10-minute Ataldazar, sub-10-minute Ataldazar run. The affixes were pretty favorable for this. It was Necrotic Skittish. This weekend in NA, it looks like they're going to get Necrotic Teaming, I think, from the Twitter poll in here. So
I told people on Twitter to vote for the Volcanic Skittish one because I wanted to see a 9-minute or a sub-9-minute Atal. It ain't happening though.
Yeah, I think that it's tyrannical in NA, right? Not fortified. That might be better. They'd
be able to blast kind of harder. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was really like Method EU did some wild stuff in that Ataldazar.
It was fun to watch.
It's their first pull, like
Dragonus specifically.
Like the first pull, like Dragonus just showed right there. Dude, that pull is fucking whack. They ran it down mid and pulled 4 Saurid packs and like 8 birds into the boss.
Yeah, 8 birds, 20 toxic Saurids, 1 Razan. 0 problems. The Method EU way. Hashtag Method
The
way.
binding shot right as they snap onto the boss was my favorite part. It caught like every Saurid. I don't think anyone even took damage from the jumps. It just had it so perfectly lined up to stack all the mobs without danger of the Saurids. I love that.
Yeah, this dungeon was done in like 7 total pulls, and each of those pulls was like it was a thing of beauty. Zalia kiting at the end as well up the fire stairs. Whew.
I saw people kiting on live, bro.
Really?
Yep. I've seen people kiting on live.
Interesting.
Really? Interesting. Yeah. Is it like, I guess, in Ataldazar or where?
No, it was in Freehold.
At how high of a key level?
Like a 21.
Okay. I wonder if there's no way it can be a thing in like in actual push keys, right? Is there?
I think somebody's supposed to try it in Motherload for like a real key.
Okay.
But I don't know how the fuck they're gonna live like the intermission. But
bit bands, leech, and I mean you get leech on live that you don't have on TR if you've got people fully geared.
Maybe.
I think you could do it with like the right class setup. Like Vengeance Demon Hunter could do that last boss without a healer, I think. But that's about it, honestly.
Yeah, Vengeance Demon Hunter.
It was a Serenius or Mikkel was going to try tanking with blood and have furrow fucking.
Oh, blood, yeah. Okay.
Blood definitely can. Yeah. That boss does all magic damage. Blood does not have a problem with that at all. Blood's taking heavy damage already. Like physical is worse for blood than magic, basically.
Yeah.
All right. We also, I guess one thing that we kept seeing was Method EU pulling that 3-pack into Shadow Zul from the bridge. Tettles, do you think that's something you can do on live as well?
Oh, dude, I did that this week. So I was playing Unholy DK, Moonkin, Outlaw Rogue, Vengeance Demon Hunter, Resto Druid, and we pulled the 3-pack into Shadow Zul. I think it's a Vengeance Demon Hunter specific thing on live. But
yeah, I was gonna say that too.
Vengeance is fucking free on Shadow Zul. It's like you add in the extra caster. He could tank both of them. You just like so we were at the point where it's like, do you Bloodlust this or do you not? And we were just like not even Bloodlusting. We were Bloodlusting Blob plus Boss, and it was like, this is so inefficient as opposed to doing something else. And we just pulled the 3-pack into fucking Zul. The scary part is the Raptor, and I keep the Raptor rooted. The Beastmaster, the road just hits all the stops on the Beastmaster. We focus it down first. We just keep kicking the Hex Priest. It's so free for some stupid reason. If you have a Vengeance Demon Hunter though,
yeah,
Vengeance
it's really
Demon Hunter,
specific.
man. That is a hell of a drug on the live keys for these like turtle strats.
Any other tank and the healer and tank basically have to spend all their brain power on just surviving Shadow Zul itself. So that's cool that Vengeance enables stuff like that though, which is good because they also kind of bring lower damage to the key, and when you can pull bigger like that, it really enables them to be as competitive as the other tank.
Right, yeah, because the damage and threat are weak points of that build of Vengeance Demon Hunter, but you know, you can work around it, and corruption scales nicely for them compared to other tanks, so it's something that might scale up nicely into the later weeks of this patch, later months of this patch even. One final thing that happened earlier today over on the Method Twitch channel, actually, was the Alpha Dungeon race. In addition to some other things, they did a Nihilotha raid race, and right now, actually, I think there's still dueling going on the Alpha. On that, all of those had like prize support and casters and stuff, doing all of them. Yeah. And the Alpha Dungeon race, I got to cast that. It was pretty cool. That was only the 2 dungeons that are currently on Alpha, and the metagame basically was to skip everything that could be skipped because there's no mob count requirements.
Because it's on normal, right?
Yeah, so you just... But the winning team actually had this strat that... So you know that boss in Halls of Atonement that you need to kill the 3 golems to activate?
Yeah.
Turns out you can walk on top of it and reset it and then attack it on Alpha, and so you don't actually even need to do that. And so the winning team ended up fighting like 0 trash packs and 4 bosses. As
well, that is getting fixed immediately. Thank you for your bug report.
They did 2 dungeons in 13 minutes and 30 seconds.
Wow, very nice.
Yeah.
You know, remember when you could pull the Shark Boss in Freehold without engaging Trothak?
I referenced that, yeah. It's very similar feel to that, although...
I don't remember what I was watching it for. I was watching a Dratnus video on like a 21 Freehold from season 1, and I was like, wait, you could pull fucking Trothak? Because I watched Dratnus run around behind and just tag him, and I was like, what is happening?
That was the good old days, man. Yeah, you needed the rogue. Like I got so good at soloing Ludwig because you had to solo Ludwig in Mythic 0 or bring your whole group there and kill Ludwig on Mythic 0 so that you could get Trothak hostile, and then he would carry over and still be hostile in the Mythic Plus. Yeah, I don't know. These Alpha Dungeon races, though, if there are more things like this on the Alpha and Beta, I might do a good job of stress testing those kind of things and making it so they don't make it to live, or at least not as many of them do. So that could be a useful thing about this sort of race if we run some more.
We'll definitely get into that at some point, because Morgan Day talked about that in his thing with Preach about their development cycle, about getting dungeons and Mythic Plus available to the player base earlier so that everything is able to be tested, even if the seasonal fix is not ready. Like they were talking about just like making sure that they get their shit out so that they can tell, oh my god, Sanguine and Waycrest Manor is troll, and stuff like that. That was a direct reference point.
Oh, good. I think that's good that they recognize that that's a problem and that we can help them. Like we as a player base can help them solve that too. Just test as early as possible.
All right, let's move on to delivering our tips of the week. My tip of the week is, if you are grinding more Coalescing Visions and more Vessels of Horrific Visions per week than you actually do Horrific Visions, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? What's the purpose behind that?
Well, I'm sure there could be some purpose.
So one purpose could be that you're like saving up and you're going to run a bunch of visions later. You're just going to run 20 visions in a couple weeks and like get all your sockets then or something. But if you're never actually planning to do, like if you're sitting there with like 150,000 Coalescing Visions in your bags and you're like still doing the assaults, but you're not doing all your visions, like you should just stop doing assaults and start doing visions until you reach an equilibrium. of
but what if you just
vessels out.
Okay, so at some point you're just gonna want to no longer do the assaults at all.
Yeah, eventually.
And you're just only gonna want to do your 1 or 2 visions a week that you were already doing.
So if you're just trying to build up a nest egg and then set yourself up to not have to do anything, but like you could just do, if you want to do 1 vision a week, you just do 1 assault per week as well, the greater assault.
That's fair. I mean, that's what I do.
Yeah. Basically, don't grind. The coalescing visions don't do anything if you're not actually planning to run the horrific visions. So I see people who are grinding those still and not doing a lot of horrific visions, and you're not getting anything out of that. So unless you're having a really fun time doing that, just maybe think about what you're getting out of the time you're spending. All right, Charles, what is your tip of the week?
My tip is about the affixes this week. These are the best affixes known to man for pushing the season. Bursting and Volcanic are both affixes that won't necessarily delay the dungeon at all. Like, they don't have any default delay like Bolstering does, or Sanguine. Even like having to use some brain power for Sanguine just delays the dungeon a little, even if you play it perfect. But these affixes potentially can waste no time at all. So this is the best week, along with the RP and Freehold is the best RP out of the 3. The Bilge Waters mean Eudora is not active, and all the Water Blasts, what are they called?
Yeah, Brine Scales.
Yeah,
Brine Scales. Yep.
All those guys are inactive as well once you drink the brew. The KR Gauntlet for North America, I think, is different than Europe, but the Council Boss in KR is the best order for North America this week, which is Axe followed by Totem and then Charge. I think.
Charge last, Axe first is Bis for sure.
Oh my god, dude! Charge that's anything that's not last is fucking awful. You could even take. You could switch up Xanazal and Kula if you really wanted to, but having to do Aka Ali while you have Xanazal or Kula out is fucking just terrible.
Yeah, and then the Junkyard in both EU and NA, you got to go Gunker.
That one is also Biz. Like, everything about Mythic Plus this week is the best rotation. So get in those keys while you can.
It's a week rotation too, bro.
Yeah, a week is better except in Underrot. Except in Underrot. In Underrot, it's not as good, I'd say, because I think that Fear guy is still worse than the Blob on the last boss.
Well, you could just not play that front right Obelisk, and you could actually just play the Horror with Worm with Defiler on the left-hand side, and then play Samrek into the Double Fear, if you really wanted to. Like, you could Shroud over there.
I'm saying it's not Bis, right? Like,
yeah, okay, yes, I agree.
It's still doable. Yeah.
I agree with that.
All right, Tuttles, let us examine your clip of the week here.
I have 2.
You have 2? All right.
There are a lot of clips of the week this week, and there were like 4 or 5.
Wait, did you change one of them?
One of them got changed, yes.
Oh no, man.
there were a lot of clips that I saw. I got a stockpile of clip of the weeks.
Okay, all right. Let's take a look at this first one coming from TTV Hunte, one of our favorite players from Team Goosey Bad. In a Shrine of the Storm key.
You can die. See ya.
No.
Ah, shit.
They fail this this skip, but with some quick thinking, he mind controls these enemies and jumps them off the edge, and that causes them to despawn.
I have an idea.
What a move.
That is Hunte's beautiful laugh.
This is how you can use priest utility to. Yeah. That's like how you use lesser known classes to their fullest potential. If you're playing any other class, you can't do that. That you can't fix that problem, right?
That's so funny.
Yeah. just yeet off the edge. Now you don't get count from that, and I think they will respawn eventually, but I'm not actually sure. If
I don't know about the
respawning.
I know you don't get count though.
Okay. Yeah, you certainly don't get the count from that. So, it's not like. On the other hand, if you want to fight like 4 mobs and there's a 2-pack and a 3-pack there, just like mind control the most annoying one off the edge, and if you don't need count from it or whatever.
What if it's mega bolstered?
Yeah, what if something's bolstered? Well, can you mind control something that has stacks of bolstering?
No, you can't.
I don't think so.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Because we're immune to all that, right?
Yeah, the first stack of bolstering makes stuff immune to most things.
You're right. I totally forgot about that.
But still, mind controlling against bolstering is a good play just to mind control before the bolstering stacks come out. Can you knock them off the edge with Typhoon there? Somebody asks in chat. No. Typhoon?
No.
So they hit like a wall, and then they will run like fucking up like the side of the middle of nowhere and come towards you and beat you down.
Yeah, Nox basically never can knock non-player entities off of the game.
So how that works is similar to how the Jaina mind control worked, where you would just launch the mobs off of the boat and they just kind of die.
Yeah, mind control a little bit more powerful. All right, let's watch the second clip of the week, man.
Okay, before you play it, Dreadnoughts, I would like to... Okay, Titanforge Podcast, if we are going to be getting any sponsors, we can create personalized advertisements like this one right here for you guys. Just let it be known that I am shameless and I will take your money in exchange for a sponsorship or a video of this sorts.
I'm going to be hiding for the duration of this clip.
All right, roll the clip.
Hi, Dratnos here with the MSI 10th generation laptop. It's sleek, it's stylish, it's 10th generation. Are you a raid leader who's got one member in your guild who keeps blaming their poor performance on a bad computer? Call right now and order them an MSI 10th generation laptop. And then the next time they mess up, you'll know they're just bad. Do you have a favorite streamer? Call now and order an MSI 10th generation laptop and send it to me. Send it to them. Very cool. But wait, we have some special offers. Call right now and we will let you buy a second laptop at full price. So buy two for the price of two.
That's really good.
All right. So, Melody in chat asked, how did you find this? Somebody clipped it and sent it to me while the show was going at the very beginning of the show. And I was looking at it, I was like, holy shit, you've got I thought it was fake. I literally thought it was fake at first. I thought they were trolling me. And no, there is a Dratnos MSI ad. And Dratnos looking like a used car salesman with his thick ass. Out here trying to sell me a new laptop. Buy two for the price of two.
That's a good deal, man.
Anyways.
You phrased it really well, though. Okay.
Titanforge Podcast looking for some sponsors. If you want us, so we can make cringy videos as well.
Yeah, if anybody would like to send me laptops, by the way, I will make videos about them. That is a deal that we can make.
Yes.
All right. Let us move on rapidly. Let us swiftly move on away from that to Preach's interview with lead encounter designer Morgan Day. So here we have a Wowhead post for anybody who wants to see it. Of that, it's got a link to the video section here on his stream, which, if you have time, is a great thing to listen to. And also, it has a live blog, which is now no longer live, of course, but that features some of the questions and answers here. Let me get this in frame better. So, let's see. What do we want to start with in this? Any answers or questions in here that... Go ahead, tell us.
We start with the Tourgas, I think. That was pretty interesting, I felt like.
Okay.
So they were talking about how live Tourgas is going to end up looking. So originally that they stated that they weren't going to let you run it infinitely. And what Morgan Day was basically saying with the interview with Preach is that they believe that they're going to probably go back on that and allow you to have more of like a sandbox play mode where you're able to run it effectively infinitely times without obtaining a legendary or legendary parts or other stuff like that. That was pretty interesting. How do you guys feel about the replayability? Because I worry that you're going to get burned into the ground. Like there should be some level of burnout. Maybe if they update it more frequently, that will be less of a problem. But I don't know.
I feel like no matter what, it's going to start to get old eventually. But I don't know. Honestly, it could just go so many different ways. At least it changes every time you do it, right?
Yeah, I think the idea of like leveling alts through Tourgast is pretty sweet. If that's something that you can do instead of leveling through questing, leveling through Tourgast.
I personally prefer leveling through island expeditions.
That's good too. Yeah, hopefully we can keep doing that into Shadowlands. Yeah,
Stop it.
I just want to make sure that my main actually kind of thing is that like, is the PvP island queue going to continue to exist into Shadowlands? Because I'm a little bit worried that it's going to take me a while to find people to queue into PvP islands with. So I hope that they gate some power level behind the PvP islands again next expansion, just to make sure that those queues are lively so that I can keep getting my PvP islands.
Jet as a stone-faced delivery. That was actually I'm impressed. But yeah, no. So they said that they were going to allow you to basically run it as many times for just cosmetic rewards, is what he said. They called it like Mage Tower-esque, I think was the direct term that was used. That'll be super interesting. There was also something that Preach brought up. I don't even know if this is on here, but Preach brought up something about maybe there being like a brawl or like a sandbox mode where they could potentially implement legendaries that may come into effect for classes, or stuff like just like class tuning changes. Maybe that can be tested in the sandbox mode before coming to life. But I guess we'll see how it ends up truly working. I don't think it'll be like class tuning stuff. I suspect it'll be more like legendaries or talent interactions or something, right?
I mean, yeah. So they said that they didn't like they Tourgas wasn't thought of as a place to test class changes to, but it is kind of a cool possibility there. Like, you can test the technology for how a new legendary effect might work, and you can test it and see how broken it is and tune it around a little bit.
They're able to test it as anima powers before delivery, and if stuff is received very well, they want to keep it. Like, they don't want to just like completely have to remake a new idea. Shit, dude, if they could repurpose old ideas into better ideas for the current game, they would absolutely take that.
I think the way, though, that the pipeline works is like it's more likely that in the expansion after Shadowlands, we will see some popular anima powers become like legendaries or whatever the system is in that expansion.
Or boss/trash mechanics come back as something that we may end up seeing again.
Perhaps, yes, perhaps. Okay, let's see. What else do we have in this? Unless, Charles, do you have any takes on Tourgas? We can move on to.
No, I agree with that. I think it's good that they're going to streamline the feedback, and like Tettles was saying, I think it is a good idea if they were to like test legendaries as anima powers for a little bit, or like take statistics on who picks what more often, and then keep the better ones or whatever. As long as they're taking feedback in some meaningful way, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I would love to see like frequent balance changes to Tourgas builds to keep that feeling fresh. That would be like, I mean, you just go in and you just take the 5 most played anima powers and delete them and make something new, and take the 5 least played ones and like buff them 100%.
What do you think for you personally would increase Tourgas replayability? Because for me, I feel like I don't even know if anima powers would give me that same feeling of newness. Like, sure, anima powers are dope, but I feel like I'm getting new shit every single run. Even still, I don't feel like I'm gated behind like one singular path.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I haven't burned out on it on alpha yet, but I haven't even played it all that much in alpha. I think a lot of it'll depend on like how exactly the runs work and like how long they last, and what kind of rewards you're getting from them. And I mean, just like having like new different zones and enemies with like different rewards and stuff could be enough as well.
I think it'll be like 30-minute digestible segments.
It sounds like they are trying to make it, have some longevity to it, and they're not just gonna yeet it out the door and be done with it. So yeah, I'm optimistic about Tourgas for sure. And I think that worst case, it'll be like a fun little diversion that gets boring, and you probably don't even need to go into as much as you need to go into like Horrific Visions now, and it'll have more difference in replayability than them. And best case, it could be like something you spend a great deal of time in.
Well, they also said it felt very optional compared to Horrific Visions, because they said that basically if you only want to get one legendary and that's the only legendary you want or need for the rest of the expansion, dude, you can go in there the first week and you can get it like they said that you can get it before the first tier even drops. So there's normally like 4 weeks from expansion launch to the time the first tier drops. So you should be able to like farm out legendaries and shit like that. So it depends on how many legendaries you need, right? Or soul binds or whatever.
Yeah. But it does. I mean, like, I'm sure that I'm going to want like all the legendaries or like many different legendary effects for various things. Like,
of course. Like, I mean, we are, but we're also min-maxy in a way that a lot of people aren't.
It's if I really don't want to go into Tourgas, I'll just only go in whenever I need a legendary. But I expect that I will want to go in there. Anyways.
My thing is, in my mind, it's either going to be closer to Island Expeditions or closer to Horrific Visions. And it sounds like it's closer to Visions, which I like a lot more. And so I'm happy about that. And it also sounds like it's like the requirement to do it is based on how it would be for Islands, where I only did islands like one time this patch at the very beginning to get my artifact power boosted a little bit, and that was it. If that's the case with Tourgas and it's that optional, I'll be happy about it. I think.
It's slightly different than Tourgas, or slightly different than slightly different than Horrific Visions because you're not constantly losing.
Yeah, that's nice.
True, you're gaining.
In Horrific Visions, the time pressure, the fact that it's like an untimed mode is actually, it's pretty, it makes it so that it's something like the people I was talking about in my tip of the week.
Slightly different. Yeah.
The people I was talking about in my tip of the week who like don't do Horrific Visions are because that's like a mode that has pressure on it, right? Like your run has a lot of pressure on it. And in Tourgas, like,
oh yeah, no,
you still want to pass and not fail, but like, you know, you can get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of your Tourgas run and you're fine.
Yeah.
All right, dungeon length and other M+ stuff. Dungeon length being shorter isn't necessarily a goal. This is, I think, a response to the 2 dungeons that are on Alpha being fairly short, which they explain as because they're level up dungeons and not as long as max level dungeons, which, you know, if you look on BFA, a lot of the max level dungeons are the longer ones.
So the dungeon that got released today, I believe, is a 3-boss dungeon as well.
Ooh, we got a new dungeon on Alpha like 20 minutes or an hour ago?
Yeah.
Okay. We should go play
I believe it's also a three boss dungeon, which was covered in the interview. He was saying that it was going to be shorter, but Morgan Day didn't necessarily believe that the dungeons were going to be shorter. He just believed that because they're normal mode and, well, in all honesty, there's no count restriction, so you can kind of just power through them like we saw.
Look, I don't think the dungeons being shorter is a bad thing either necessarily. Like I don't think that, you know, 30 minutes is worse than 40. Like I think that if you look at like what the least popular dungeons are right now, they're like 2 of the least popular are Shrine and King's Rest, the 2 longest timers we've got this expansion.
What the hell, I like Shrine.
Some of our favorite, some of the most popular are like Freehold, you know, Taltazar, Underrot, short
Underrot 33,
30. Yeah.
I think it's good to have a mix of like shorter and longer dungeons, like not too long, but having some variability.
But Maw was 22, bumped up to 24, and it didn't feel very sick. But
yeah, Maw. A lot of people have a soft spot for Maw, but I agree. I think that Maw was maybe a little short, mostly just because it. But like the reason I felt like Maw was unsatisfying was because it was so much shorter than everything else. Like, I think that if you made a whole expansion of dungeons in the 20 to 30 minute range instead of like ones that had where you could get Maw or you could get Halls of Valor.
But like, yeah, Archway and Halls of Valor were 40. One 45. Was 45, and the other was like 42. Mm-hmm. So both of those were long endeavors. But I don't know. I think that the 30 to 40 minute range is normally pretty solid. I think under 30 would feel kind of weird to me, maybe. But I don't know.
I liked it. I really enjoyed Maw because a lot of groups just don't have time to blast dungeons 8 hours a day. They have like an hour. And sometimes it takes people a long time to even get ready. And so at that point, you're like, all right, let's just choose the shortest dungeon. And you'll blast out a Court of Stars or Maw of Souls in like 25 minutes or 20 minutes. And this expansion is like either Freehold or Underrot, and that's it. So, I mean.
Okay, you know what? That's fair. The shorter the dungeon, the easier it is to get people to kind of blast through a dungeon in under a shorter time span. I actually agree with that. Never mind.
Yeah.
Changed my opinion.
I think the main thing is just to not like have keystones that could be 20 or could be 100% longer than others, because that's kind of a, you know, feels bad and hard to balance rewards from.
Necrotic Wake and Halls of Atonement don't look they don't look like they're shorter than 30 minutes, do they? I mean, maybe Necrotic Wake is
maybe
shorter.
I don't know. Maybe Halls of Atonement is. I guess it's 4 boss dungeons.
Once you give a count requirement to all the trash in Halls of Atonement, there's no way.
They also want to, so they said on affixes, they want to avoid feelings of the dungeon being dead. And they mentioned Waycrest and Sanguine, which to me is not the most dead combo that exists in BFA by a long shot, but still.
Tyrannical and Siege of Borealis?
Yeah, Tyrannical and any dungeon. But yeah, I'm glad that they're looking into that. And my favorite bullet point here is they're considering turning on Mythic Plus early compared to BFA beta, to smooth out some of the rough edges early, even if the seasonal affix isn't ready yet. I think it'll be really great to have Mythic Plus for testing early.
Okay, something that kind of went under the radar with what Morgan Day was explaining in his analysis is that the affixes, that the delta between the affixes is fine, and it's okay to be like, there's supposed to be a gap between the affixes and the dungeons for like what you're supposed to be able to do week to week. he said that whenever the delta gets too extreme between dungeons on the same week, that's where the problem occurs. Like a 4-level disparity is what he described, which there technically could be a 4-level disparity depending on what the dungeon is. I think right now there could be, right?
So there's two different problems, right? There's the problem of like King's Rest is, you could get a King's Rest or a Junkyard.
What if you don't have a purge in King's Rest?
Yeah.
No, like what do you do with that? Like,
and then so that's one problem, and then the other problem is like the difference between bolstering explosive tyrannical and fortified bursting volcanic, right? Like that. Yeah. That is definitely a problem that they've acknowledged, and
I think if they are able to get the stuff on the Mythic Plus stuff on the beta quick enough, then allow people to test it, they should be able to get enough high quality feedback to be able to get stuff to where we don't have to have a mid expansion. A lot of inconsequential mobs no longer do on death affixes rework just mid expansion.
All right, we've also got some info on Castle Nath Rio, which is going to be the Uldir / Emerald Nightmare / High Mall raid, the first raid of the expansion.
10 bosses.
10 bosses, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Sick. To me...
High Mall was 7, Ian was 7, Uldir was 8.
10,
that's a lot for a first tier.
10 for first tier of the raid sounds like sick to me, especially because Castle Nath Rio looks sick. It looks like... The whole Revendreth, that vampire gothic theme looks so good. In
Dratnus is home, bro.
It is, yeah. yeah, I love it. And so the one other piece of information they teased here is that on the Denathrius encounter, you'll be falling to a new floor, and it'll be a multiple floor fight. What does that sound like? Blackhand. Yeah.
At Blackhand, at Avatar.
Fallen Avatar Sargeras.
Avatar, yeah. Let's call him Avatar Sethralis, but that's not it either. It's Fallen Avatar.
Yeah.
Or Talik.
Well, Talik's elevator.
Shut the fuck up, bro. Okay, Talik for a first boss of a first raid. I don't hate that boss. That boss is pretty good.
All right. Then the final things they talked about here was that Covenants. They're not done making stuff yet. Soulbinds, Conduits, and Legendaries are still coming online. They've identified Conduits would be a great tuning knob for unique benefits. If they identify that Kyrian Warlock is very single target, they can create an AoE Conduit. What do you think about this knob here that is being held up as the way that Covenant abilities will not be a problem?
So I still hate... Okay, like, it depends on what the Conduits do. So say the Conduit gives you like the Ravendreth or the Vinthier ability, yet you miss like some small piece of it.
I don't think that's how those work. I don't think that's it's more that like the Conduits give you like they're unique to your Covenants as well, and they can they can just, if you have a bad, if you have the single target Covenant, you can get better AoE Conduits in there and kind of try and make everything like have the same potential in all situations.
So okay. Basically, my opinion, I have a different opinion than Squishy and I actually had a conversation with this about for a couple hours the other night. And my opinion is that I hate the feeling that I'm going to let down my team in one aspect of the game, and I have to make a unified decision of that for a long time. So am I going to have to play Prague as something and then spend an extreme amount of time to swap to Mythic Plus once progression rating is over, and then forever do farm as like a bad spec? Is that like
that would
really
be weird?
I mean,
yeah.
Did Red Groups ever lose damage the next week?
That's what I'm gonna do. Is I'll progress in whatever is best for progression, and then I will do Mythic Plus on either a different character in a Mythic Plus Covenant, or on the same character, and I'll swap Covenants to that. And but if it's an annoying quest line, like I will be annoyed and do the annoying quest line, and then
exactly. But which takes longer, gearing up a second character. Or
it'll probably be faster than gearing up a second character, right? Like it's hard to imagine them making something that takes longer than gearing up a second character, right?
That was the point, is that I'm just going to be suboptimal for raid after progression's over.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
I kind of fucking hate that. But
I'm not going to be a huge fan of that, but also like, okay.
It's a shitty system. But if they're making me pick, I'm going to do that quest line or whatever they're having me doing on stream, and I'm going to be frowning the whole entire time to let them know that I'm displeased.
Yeah, and then people are going to be. I think for me, the sad part is going to be the people getting rejected from groups because they are not interested in doing that.
I hate the thought that may happen.
I mean, it's going to.
I hate the thought that that's going to happen.
A little part of me kind of will enjoy it if it's like speedrunnable, where maybe you can get the quest line down to like a 20-minute session, just if you like optimize it to the kind of like the World Quest World Tour challenges or whatever people did at the beginning of the expansion or the beginning of each tier.
Pre-raid, you got to do your quest line to get into your raid covenant, and then post-raid, you do your quest line really quick to get back to your Mythic Plus. Or you're just like, yeah, hey guys, I can key for an hour, and then I'm raiding in 7 hours, so I need to start my quest line, and then I'll be free in another 7 hours after that.
Do you think that they should remove like dual specialization and like shit like that, where you force your character to just be like one spec now?
No.
What do you mean, like remove
artificially enforcing that shit right now?
Covenants are something that makes it harder to swap specs, but for sure for some specs. Some specs might get lucky and just have the same Bis Covenant though for both of their specs.
Yeah, my response to that is hell no. Please don't do that.
Yeah, I agree with you though. That's an interesting.
I mean, it wasn't coming from me. I was just like, but
no, I think that's an interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I think that when you encounter somebody who's like, oh no, this is going to be totally fine, you pose them that question and see if that's something that they actually want. All right, let us see. Is there anything else that they've got here? Oh yeah, we're going to be able to test all the Covenant abilities except for Paladin and Rogue on the alpha soon, and no updates yet on Shadow Priest, but maybe soon. Oh, and then the GCD. For the first time ever, Blizzard has answered that they need to have the community's help in identifying the worst offenders that are on the GCD. This is only the 73rd time that Blizzard has said this about the GCD. That they need the community to tell them what the problem is.
Frenzy Regeneration, please take that off the GCD. Fiery Brand, please come off the GCD.
Me casting 6 globals before I get to start doing damage on half the specs in the game.
Hunter requires 3 globals before I do damage. It's kind of awkward, I'm not going to lie.
It is. Like back-to-back cooldowns.
So part of it said Blood of the Enemy is also on the global. So I don't know if I was just pressing Bestial Wrath and Aspect of the Wild, I don't know if it necessarily feel that bad, but going one into the other is really weird.
And there's like barb shots in there that don't feel particularly good, but those are okay.
And you have to fill in the barb shots, and you want a multi-shot. It's a very scripted.
I don't know, like enhancement is like you're like, all right, earth biter or rock biter to get some maelstrom, and then you're like flame tongue, frostbrand, feral spirit, fury of air. Now I'm allowed to start doing damage, and you know essence as well in there, and now you're allowed to start doing damage after like 6 globals that don't do any damage.
Yeah. The ones that don't do any damage at the same time as pressing them, I think should be changed. And some defensive stuff like
I see what she said. Yeah.
Okay, I just pulled that up.
Actually, I replied to this tweet while the show was in its pre-show thing. But so this is a new change that's been data mined, or I guess I don't know. Data mined, which is Blade Flurry now has basically you unlock it when you level up, but it's a leveling perk thing, which will just always be on at max level. Where when you hit Blade Flurry, it instantly does an AOE attack as well. In addition to giving you the Blade Flurry buff.
I like that because it removes like the maintenance buff feel where you're like the global is I hate the concept of just like the global is dead to be able to put up a buff on yourself. It just feels, I mean, I guess it's like a cooldown, but it doesn't feel like a cooldown. I don't know. It's really weird. I like that change though.
I love this. Yeah, I think that this is a great way to fix the GCD without solving it the way that they said they're not going to solve it. They're basically like, obviously there's the way that we all know that they could solve the GCD, but this is a way that does, like, if they just made all the abilities that are a problem do something up front, it would feel a lot better than it does right now. Because for me, that the biggest problem is really just the fact that you're pressing these buttons that do nothing immediately and are just empower. You press a button that empowers your next 15 seconds, and then your next global is like a button that empowers your next 10 seconds, and then you get to start doing damage. And
or like Aspect of the Wild and Bestial Wrath, like exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah,
it's so fucking awkward.
Yeah.
So this, I think this is a good solution.
Pressing Bestial Wrath every 15 seconds, if you get it optimally off cooldown, is just like Delta said, it's a dead global. It doesn't do any damage, but it maintains your buff.
All right. that is our talk about Shadowlands interview and stuff. Now we will talk a little bit about some Mythic Plus theory for the rest of our show here.
Yep.
So this topic is about utilizing your cooldowns. We're going to talk about offensive cooldowns, defensive cooldowns, and Bloodlust. But let's start off by just kind of, I think the easiest building block, the easiest place to start here is if you're just like a player in a pug group with not too much communication, trying to figure out if you're supposed to use your offensive cooldown or not throughout the dungeon. Tettles, what is kind of the most important thing to do with your cooldown in Mythic Plus? Whatever your offensive cooldown is.
Use that shit. Press that shit on CD. Okay, so whenever, especially if you're playing a class that you don't normally play, but even if you just don't know when to use your cooldown, say you're running with a new group or whatever, press them as many times as you can across the whole entire dungeon. And then if you use one and it sucks and it's like, oh, I would change this if I had to run this back, then you change it after the fact. Do not miss uses of your cooldowns because you're holding them for the god RNG or like most optimal timing or something like that. That is the best way to miss a use and to do 0 damage.
Yeah, it does depend a little bit on what your cooldown is. I think that kind of one cooldown that is particularly vulnerable to like if you use this badly it doesn't do anything is like Combustion. Combustion, if you fire this off on like a small 3-pack and like it's really going to be inefficient, and then you don't have it available for the big pull and you're not going to do any damage for that, or you don't have it available for the boss. So it does depend a little bit on what your cooldown is, but even then, like the default should be to just use it as many times as possible in any given dungeon.
So, but like people will hold it for on pull of dungeon bosses, and that's always a mistake because using it in the middle 50% of a dungeon boss, if you're only getting it one use anyways, is the exact same as using it on pull.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just hard to. It's like hard because you don't need it on pull of a boss.
It depends.
Like even if you're bloodlusting it, you don't really need it on pull. Sure, there's like some form of damage amp there, but you're not going to triple your damage by using it on pull with bloodlust.
It does depend on the cooldown and the boss, right? Like there are some bosses where it's important to make sure that you have your cooldowns on pull. Kragmaw the Infested, for instance, like if you're trying to cool down in the middle of that boss fight, it's you're a lot likely to get a scuffed cooldown because you tantrums way more often in the middle of the fight than on pull, and you can just kind of turret on pull where it's the only time in the fight you can really turret.
Okay. And people are typing in chat and they're giving really good examples of times that you should maybe hold your cooldowns for a little bit. Combusting Priestess Alunza, right as she's about to kill herself, bad. I would almost say Combusting Priestess Alunza in general
almost
is very
under
bad.
Any circumstance, it is a mistake to use cooldowns on Priestess Alunza, except on pull that will be up before the boss is over.
Exactly. Or if you want to hold it for a damage amp phase, like coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, not a long damage amp, a short window damage amp, it makes sense. It doesn't make sense for something like Harlan Sweet, who transitions at 30%. You don't really want to hold cooldowns for that.
Yeah, Harlan, you don't save time by saving cooldowns on. Coin-operated Crowd Pummeler you do, because coin-operated Crowd Pummeler gives himself a damage amp for a period of time, not for a percentage of its health.
Exactly.
And that is the difference, because if you cool down Harlan sub 30%, you're just going to kill him faster through the damage amp, and you're getting less value out of the damage amp. So there's no way that you can game Harlan and save cooldowns unless your goal is to look good on damage meters. And if your goal is to look good on damage meters rather than time the key as fast as possible, I respect that. But it's that's not what we're trying to optimize.
Well, for example,
if you take the Growl formula,
yes,
IO is greater than maximum DPS, is greater than timing the key, is greater than friendship. And so friendship is the very lowest common variable.
That clip is so
Damn
funny. Yeah.
It's a funny clip. I think there's a lot of layers to planning your cooldowns. Like the default cooldown usage is what Tettle said first, where you don't want to like have it up on pull necessarily. You just use it efficiently on cooldown, and then add in after that. Is there a like very dangerous phase in the boss fight? Do I need to have it for that? Is there a time when the boss takes more damage? Do I need to have it for that? Like add those on top of that base rule. And then there's also the like having to help your tank and healer is a pull coming up where I have to have this cooldown even though it's inefficient. You also have to add that rule in as well.
Right. So it's like like so combustion is like an offensive cooldown, right? Where so using it to maximize your overall damage throughout a dungeon is kind of plan A with it. But it's also a defensive cooldown in that it kills the pack faster, right? So if you need it as a defensive cooldown to make the pull killable, right? If you need the pull to last 20 seconds and no longer, then that is something that you need to use your combustion for. I think that's not something that really comes up in pugs all that often. That's more of something that you know happens in a actual group where you have a route and you're like, all right, look, we will do this pull because we have combustion. And that is part of the reason why Fire Mage is so good in high level live keys and underperforms in both the MDI and in pugs. Is because you don't get a huge element of that. All right. The other kind of thing you could do with this is the way that your logic works is working backwards. From like, if you know that there is a point in time that you require you need to use your cooldown, right? If you're like, okay, look, you know, I need to cool down Kragmaw on pull so that I can cool down Kragmaw at the end of the pull, at the end of the fight as well, right? Like if it's a 2-minute 30-second boss fight and you've got a 2-minute cooldown, the only way you're going to get 2 uses is to cool down on pull, right?
Okay. Yes, exactly. So you have to work backwards, but there is it depends on the boss. I will say as well. So
because some bosses doesn't matter, right? Yeah.
Some bosses don't need 2 cooldowns on them. Soulbound Goliath is like one example of that, where you don't really have to cool down him twice. And so if your cooldown comes up at 50%, even if the boss is 230, it doesn't matter, right? You can just kind of get away with 1 cooldown on him, and then like 1 cooldown on the trash pack right before, 1 cooldown on the trash pack immediately following him, and it works out like that. Yeah,
but if you decide you do want to, you know, cool down a boss twice, that means you know that you're going to cool down at the start of that boss fight. That means that you need to your final use before then needs to be like so that it doesn't lock you out of that, right? So if you know that you're going to be pulling Kragmaw in 3 minutes and you want to combust it on pull, that means you can combust and you must combust some point between now and the next 1 minute passes, right? And it doesn't matter when, right? No matter what, you're not getting an extra use as a result of that, right? Because you're not going to use it again when it comes off cooldown until you pull Kragmaw. So you just want to use it on the best pull that is available between now and 1 minute has passed.
Or sometimes I'll notice if we're starting to get close on the timer. So say there are 5 minutes left on the timer and I'm playing a Demon Hunter. I know that I should meta right immediately. And then, or say I'm not playing Vision Protection Miner, but I would be. But say it is 4 minutes. If I'm looking at the timer and there's only 5 minutes left on the timer, I know that I should meta right then because I'll have it 1 minute prior to the dungeon timer ending anyways. So if I'm really trying to time that key, I'll have the meta for the last minute of the boss fight, of the final boss fight, to try to help my team time the key. So even if it's like the shittiest meta of all time on like 3 rando mobs or an obelisk mob or something like that, using it right there will ensure that you get a second use as opposed to just 1 use at the very beginning of the pull on a boss.
Right.
Yeah,
so
that's important.
This is the philosophy of looking at the timer and working backwards from assuming that you are going to need the whole timer, right? Because if you're going to need more than the timer has to offer, it doesn't matter anyways because you've already depleted, right?
Exactly.
You can't win. And if you're going to do it in less than the timer, it also doesn't matter because you won, right? So the only time where it really matters in the last 5 minutes of the dungeon, how you use your cooldowns, is if you're going to need all 5 of those minutes, right? And then you want to optimize to get as many cooldowns into that 5 minute period as possible. So yeah, you know, it's the exact same thought process there, where it's all about just doing the math on how many uses you're going to get and then seeing how much flexibility that gives you, right? So like once you have less than 1 minute and 30 seconds left on the clock, you are no longer, there's no pressure for you to hit your blood of the enemy anymore. You're only getting 1 use, right? So save it until the best blood of the enemy that's available to you.
Okay, so also something that I see people misuse cooldowns a lot on is if there's going to be a lot of travel time between a trash pack, from trash pack to trash pack, use the cooldown on the trash pack right before you end up running around. So say you're about to play, say you're going to do Trothak and you're not going to play the Obelisk after, you're just going to run straight to Harlan's area. Dude, use that cooldown on the last 15% of Trothak, even if it's not optimal, because you're going to be running for the next 45 seconds following the death of the boss.
Dude, I metaed the last 20% of Samrak Beckoner of Chaos's health in Toldagor today, because the next 3 minutes we were doing cannons, so...
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
a good example.
it's going to be up on Valerie anyway, right? Doesn't matter. It's absolutely like, you know, you take inefficient cooldown uses if there's going to be downtime to let it recover. Okay, let's talk.
Same thing with tank defensives as well.
Yeah.
I feel like it's worth mentioning. If you're not going to need shield wall for another like 5 minutes, just pop it. Like, there's no point in taking more damage if you have the option to use another cooldown for free. And also, I wanted to mention some defensives and offensive cooldowns have the same icon and spell. Like Avatar is a major defensive and offensive cooldown for Prot Warrior. So what you want to do is always have that on pull for like any pack you're ever going to pull. And then likely in a higher key, you're going to get a second use out of it during the pull. But you want to make sure that's at a time during that pull that it'll still enable it to be up for the next pull, basically. It's hard to calculate mid-pull, but try to do that as best you can.
Yeah, you really want to avoid not having Avatar on pull as much as possible as a Prot Warrior. Yeah, so there are quite a few cooldowns that come with an offensive and defensive component though as well, right? Like
yeah, they're really complicated.
For Mage, Lucid Leech can be a huge defensive component to that as well.
That's true.
Metamorphosis comes with an immunity frame for Demon Hunters, and there are things you can use that on profitably as well. So yeah, all of those things it's a really interesting balance between what is more important, which of these do I actually need in this dungeon? And that is often the thought process should be thinking about, like, are you going to lose this dungeon because you didn't meet the DPS check, because you failed the timer? Or are you going to lose this dungeon because you wiped because, you died to something? And if it's pretty clear that the dungeon is one of those two things, you should change your decision-making to heavily favor either using your cooldowns for their offensive components or for their defensive components, respectively. All right, let's talk a little bit about Bloodlust, which is also an offensive and defensive cooldown. Hey, How about that? So when you're assigning your Bloodlust throughout a dungeon, the first priority is you need to assign Bloodlust to certain encounters, right? Like you need Bloodlust for Galv Tyrannical, right? You need Bloodlust for Kragmaw Tyrannical. You maybe can get away without it on Fortified, but like you probably want to assign those to those on
Shadow
Fortified
Zul.
as well. Yeah, Shadow Zul Fortified.
Yeah.
Unless you have a Vengeance Demon Hunter or Blood Death Knight.
If you have a Vengeance Demon Hunter, you fucking play whatever you want.
Yeah, if you have a Vengeance Demon Hunter, that is where you can assign your healer a bathroom break. But yeah, so step one of figuring out where your Bloodlust go is place your Bloodlust where you need to have them, right? And then step two is the Tettles formula of cast it as many times as you can in the dungeon, making sure that you're not gonna, make it so that it's on cooldown when you need it, right? So Bloodlust on pull of the first big pull you do, the first pull where you're going to get any good value from it, and then Bloodlust on cooldown for the rest of the dungeon is option 2. And like try to pull big when Bloodlust is up.
So what about 33-minute dungeon timers like Under Rod or Freehold? We see those dungeons be typically 3 Bloodlust dungeons, even though they technically be 4.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So the thing there is that like there are more like the value of getting those good Bloodlusts, right? Like if you're trying to 4 Lust Freehold, you have 2 minutes and 20 seconds total throughout the dungeon, minus 5 seconds per death, that your Bloodlust can be unused and off cooldown, right? Anytime more than that, and Bloodlust starts your 4th Bloodlust starts exiting the timer.
Especially if you start accruing deaths mid-run, it makes that timer really hard to stick to, because that just increases the time, like the minute buffer between the end of the dungeon and all 4 lusts, where it just starts to close, right? You start to lose time on the dungeon. So
instead, rather than trying to hit those 4 Bloodlusts, you instead just put 3 Bloodlusts throughout the dungeon, and then you get 12 minutes of wiggle room to move them around, and that makes it so that you always get them on your big pulls and on your bosses. I don't know. It's tough, right? Because like theoretically, the 4 lusts would be good, right? Getting extra Bloodlust would be good. Yeah. But like it makes your pathing have to obey some pretty big constraints in order to get value from all those lusts. Okay, let's see. We already talked about a lot of this stuff. Let's talk a little bit about defensive cooldowns. Defensives are also things for your healers, and planning out how to use them, especially so that there are some boss fights that I would describe as fights where you kind of need to have defensive plans, or not. Like you don't have to pre-plan them, but some of them you should, and some of them you kind of need to at least make good decision making about your defensives on the fly. So the first example of this, I think, is Kragmaw the Infested, right? Tantrums every 45 seconds, and in high level keys you need a medium to large amount of stuff to survive that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably the best example and the most complicated, because it depends a lot on your healer and what defensives your group has to offer, and the speed of the player. Like, say, when it comes to a defensive that immobilizes you, like Ice Block, you have to take that into consideration as well.
Right.
Vent Jet as well. Vent Jet similar to Tantrum in the how you layer your offensive or your defensive cooldowns there.
Right. So the kind of the rule of thumb for these is that first of all, you should try and get 2 uses of anything you could get 2 uses of. So any 1 minute defensive, anything like Blur, you fire Blur off on the first Tantrum and you'll have it for the third, right? And that means that you're going to get more defensive coverage than if you use, like if you try to Nether Walk Blur, then you don't have Blur for the third and you don't have anything for the third. Whereas if you go Blur, Nether, Blur, then you've got something for each of the Tantrums, right?
But Dratnus, what if I'm trying to use 2 health potions?
Yeah, health potion, health stone are of course included in this as well, and you do only get 1 use of each of those.
Unless you die and then get rid.
Yeah, true. Actually, battle res as a defensive is something that kind of has gotten used. I've used it on Cool of the Butcher before.
Yeah, me too.
Back like season 1, we would just be like, "Yep, this goes on somebody that's not the rogue or the DH. We're gonna res them after the first set of cooldown. Like after the first one will heal through, the second one will just res them, whatever." And then like you mentioned, defensives that immobilize you. So like on Kragmaw in particular, Ice Block immobilizes you, and Nether Walk speeds you up, right? So if you use Ice Block and Nether Walk on the same Tantrum, then you can still soak about the same amount of ticks, because one of your people's immobilized, but one of your people is double speed, right?
Well, you can't cast Fel Rush while...
Yeah, that's true, but you can come out another and Fel Rush twice,
That's fair. I mean, I get your point.
Like, I think it's a reasonable thought to have there. Or like, another example is like Trank, right? Like, if your healer is tranking, they can't move. If your healer is casting Divine Hymn, I guess, they can't move as well.
That's true.
To invent a new healer spec. So that is, that's the kind of thing where you'd want to make sure that you don't use other defensives that immobilize you overlapping with those, right?
Yeah, so for something like Kragmaw or something like No Mercy for You, whenever you do the Tantrum and the Vent Jets, generally the combo is player defensives first, and then we'll use a major healer cooldown such as Tranquility or Wings for Holy Pallies. I don't know how powerful Divine Hymn is, but Divine Hymn,
Revival.
Monks can revival. Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that for the second one. Make sure that your healer is also positioned in the room to where they can get healing coverage on everybody. And then third one will be personals again. This is the point in which you use Rally, Healthstone, Darkness, all that shit. Basically, you throw out the book because most classes that aren't Druid are not Druid or Demon Hunter are not going to have their cooldowns back up again.
Faint. Excuse me, I faint Crimson Vial each of those.
Okay, well, if you faint Vial every single one, then you're going to be okay. But most classes of the non-OP variety don't have shit back up for that.
All the non-leather classes have a hard time with that, yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So I think Kragmaw is kind of an interesting one because it's pretty predetermined, right? You kind of just set this out. Let's talk a little bit about Overseer Courgas, because I think Overseer Courgas planning out, like figuring out how you're supposed to activate defensives there is a little bit less of something that you can kind of pre-plan and a little bit more of like smart decision making and reacting well.
So I guess I'll start with this. Basically, it comes down to what comp you have. Because Courgas's doubles will target range first and foremost, so they have to be far more careful about their defensive usage than melee. If you're a melee on Courgas, if you get an explosive burst on you, and it's a double, dude, just defensive it. You're hard chilling even if you just press any defensive there as a melee. That should be your first and foremost opinion. If you're ranged, you have to be a little bit more cautious. Dratnus, you want to talk about what range has to do?
Yeah, ranged players are going to get targeted by every single cast of explosive burst, depending on the number of ranged. Unless there's 4 ranged players somehow in your group, and that means, first of all, like how did you get all the way to the end of a Mythic Plus dungeon? But second of all, it's not really something we need to worry about.
That's fair.
There's a jailer that stands outside the instance is like, you cannot enter with that many.
Halt. So yeah, that's. The as a range, you kind of need to. You can't just fire off, Turtle the first time you get targeted by explosive burst as a hunter, because you're going to take huge damage from every single overlap there. You probably can't use anything until you get a double, and then you probably want to layer 1 defensive per double, and use another if things go horribly wrong.
So major defensive cooldown is used on the first double. You're not going to want to use a healer cooldown. You're not going to want to use the wings, the revival, the trank. The major healing cooldowns on the first double. You're going to want to use all of your defensives. Bring out the health actually, no, you just want to use your major defensive. You don't even want to use health potion, health stone. So for the first double that you end up getting, especially if you're ranged, or the healer. That should be your bark skin. That should be your what is it for value? DP?
Divine protection, yeah.
Yeah, divine protection. Yeah, it should be your divine protection. It could be your wall too if you're playing holy. Like you probably could just get away with just walling there. You don't necessarily have the bubble, but those are the ones that you should just personal. Second one should be major healing cooldown, potentially health potion, health stone if you're getting kind of monk-ass. That's like a judgment call. I would recommend separating health potion and health stone on Tourgas. By the way, using them together is pretty trapped there.
I mean, you can use them before the second explosive burst hits if you're going to die to it. Like that can be something you can do as well if you're ticking down to the dot. That's also a place where melee can really help out, right? Because like if a rogue gets targeted on a double, you can just cloak, right? And that means your healer doesn't have to heal you and can instead heal the other person. So like as a rogue on that fight, I'm saving my cloak for if I'm targeted as part of a double. If there's like one ranged and I'm a rogue on that fight, or two ranged or whatever, and I'm a rogue on that fight, I'm saving my cloak for that. But on a demon hunter, I'm just blurring like anytime I get targeted pretty much, because blur's a short cooldown and I just want to get some value from it, and like I'm not that likely to get targeted by any given explosive burst.
Right.
So it depends a little bit on exactly how your cooldown works there.
So I've been playing a hunter a lot lately, and on that boss in particular, like since you're the ranged player, you get targeted by pretty much every explosive blast. So we talked about turtling the first one, right? The first double, that is, of Overseer Courgas is
which, by the way, you can turtle both hits, right? If you turtle within 0.2 seconds or something of the explosive burst hitting you, and stay in it the whole time, you can get both of them.
Yeah, so you can overlap like that and then double dip your big defensive. As well as that, you want to feign death only the explosive burst part of the boss's attack, not the shot. Because if you feign death the shot, he will screw up his spell queuing and cause doubles more often. But if you feign death with the Azurite trait duck and cover, every time you're about to get the explosive burst, and you get a shield on top of your full health bar, as it should be at least. So you can use the shields to your advantage to survive the hits. You should also ask for your healers external if they're a Restorative Druid, HPAL, or anything else with something to save you in between your own turtle usage.
Yeah, you also
there's a lot you can do even as a hunter.
You have your Spirit Beast out, so you have your defensive from that, and Spirit Mends as well.
As mage, you know what you do here too. So as mage, you actually have to watch your timer on Blazing Barrier, Frost Barrier, Arcane Barrier, and like so you line it up if you're going to have a double to where your barrier is going to eat the first hit of the double, and then right before the second hit comes out, you immediately pop your barrier again. Like a lot of times you can track like resounding protection shields and stuff like that, and know if they're going to come up in the middle of tantrum, or if you're going to get like effectively double value of the shield. So watch your barrier timing if you're playing a mage.
Yeah, all of this is kind of. It only really comes up in the level of keys where you start to like actually be super dead to these things. But I don't know. Thinking about this, no matter what keystone level you're playing at, is going to make you a better player. So.
Yeah, I mean, let's say you're doing a 15 with your friend that just came back to the game and they're healing. Like they're going to be really under geared, and it would help to know all these things just to help them survive the boss fight that's really challenging for them.
Mm-hmm. So basically, no matter what, like also just like if your goal is to get better and to like eventually do big keys, then play like it's a big key even when it's not, and you're going to be improving as a result of that too. Okay, I think the examples that exhausts my examples of defensive planning and cooldown stuff here. I'm about ready to move on to Q&A unless there's anything cooldown related that either of you think I missed.
No, I think we're good.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
Let us move on then to Q&A. Our first one comes from Discord from Monty Mole. Do you think Raider.io, or Blizzard, should show a leave percentage for players in Mythic Plus dungeon, or offer a baseline level of accountability for players to finish dungeons they sign up for?
I'm on the no variety on this one.
Charles, what do you think?
I think it should give them like a low priority. I don't know. It's hard to say. Some games have like a low priority queue. I don't know. I really don't know.
I think that there's most of the implementations of like, preventing people from leaving, I think would make WoW worse than it is now. Like I think that in most cases the solution would be worse than the problem. Like Leavers and Mythic Plus is annoying. That's a pain and all, but like getting stuck in dungeons is also something that like getting trolled and held hostage in a dungeon because you can't leave because it's gonna impact your Leaver score or whatever. would be what happened if there was penalties like this that actually got added to the game. So my perspective here is just like we do not need Mythic Plus to become more like LFR, like the Dungeon Finder, where there's like a deserter buff and stuff. Like I think that those systems where the game tries to enforce group standards are worse than just players enforcing it.
I agree. So my base opinion of that is like, you don't use LFG if you don't want this to occur. It is just my thoughts on it. Generally speaking, like, sure, I get that not everybody's going to have like a set group of people that they can always game with, and the LFG is good for a large portion of the player base. You have to take the pros with the cons. You can't just, it's an MMORPG. You have to play with other players. Sometimes they're going to troll your key and fucking leave it. It's just
right. And the main problem I have here, like if there was a way to stop people from trolling, leaving your key at no cost, I'd be fine with implementing that. But I believe that if you implemented any system like this, people would then troll you by, staying in the key and being like, you can't leave, and I'm just gonna.
Oh, dude, if I got trapped in a key, I would be so fucking mad.
Yeah, they're just AFK.
Say somebody's just holding my key hostage for an hour and just wasting my time. I would be furious. That's worse. I'd take the fucking lever.
Right.
That's a good point. I think it's not possible because it's a PvE type of format. If it was player versus player and the other team would just end up winning soon, then I think they would be okay to introduce something like that. But the fact that someone could troll like that and just literally AFK for 3 hours is awful.
I mean, the alternative too, like, okay, so say Dratnos and I are playing together. All right, dude, we've depleted the shit out of this drop it in 2 chest. Haha. No, man, this is to affect my lever percentage. I'm like, the fuck are you talking about?
We gotta finish the key, man. It's gonna hurt my Raider IO. Yeah.
No, I believe that I agree with Dratnos. I think the alternatives are worse in general. I also think that this is just a byproduct of LFG.
All right. Next question comes from Tom the Monk in Twitch chat. Should a coordinated group generally stack CDs and try to pull bigger, or spread CDs? Generally use them together, I'd say. Especially like tank defensives and DPS offensives are a great match because that lets you pull a big pack that you couldn't otherwise pull, right? Like because you have shield wall and combustion, you can fight 10 enemies at once. That being said, sometimes they're like if you're playing like a double mage key, sometimes you want to alternate your combust, right? Because like 2 is overkill, and then you're left doing no damage for 2 minutes, and that can be a thing.
It really depends on the class. Like you have to identify whichever class needs to be coordinated around the most, and then pick your route based on that. Like Mage and Holy Paladin are the biggest examples. I think Boomkin's up there with Incarn or CA.
Nah, it doesn't
disagree, so maybe not. But
when you multiply by 0, the answer is always 0. It doesn't matter.
Should a DH meta if mage is combusting? It depends on the pack. Basically, if you're going to look to chain pull after the pack, then you should still meta even if the mage is combusting. It doesn't matter. It depends on pack duration too. I would say that you can still meta a pack even if a mage is combusting. I don't think that it comes down to like are you going to lose a use over the duration of the whole dungeon if you don't meta that 40-second pack or whatever, or that 20-second pack or whatever? The answer is probably. Like if you're actually going to hold it for an additional 20 seconds plus the time that it takes to set up the next pull, you may lose a full cooldown off of the next pull. So you kind of have to think about it. How much is it worth?
Yeah.
All right. Next question.
On the opposite side of that, sorry, I just want to say for Shadow Priest, like any class that has dots and they have a lot of ramp time, you want to stay in combat as long as you can and not really have big pulls, little pulls, big pulls, little pulls. You just want to like have a constant flow. So if you have a group that's suited to do that, you should definitely do that for your Shadow Priest.
All right, next question comes from Lou in Discord. This one's a little bit of softball. Is stacking Vita Titan Charge and M+ good? Does the buff stack, or is it just a waste? Yes, it's good. That's good. Does the buff stack, or is it just a waste? I think it... Actually, don't know how... It does stack? Okay,
it stacks, yeah.
Yeah.
So like in a full Vita group, you get about 800 to 1,000 haste, I think, somewhere there when it's one person procs.
Not bad. All right, next question, Ryle Hunter. What about potions? Should I be using them on trash too? In a high-level key, you should be trying to pre-pot every pull. Yes.
The nerf tank TV logic is if it's score, you potion.
if it's score, you potion. Yeah, love that. So you don't necessarily want to combat pot all that often, but pre-potting every time you are about to pull and your pre-pot is available is a good way to do dungeons, I'd say. And then second potting, like difficult bosses when it comes up or whatever. Yeah.
There are a few instances where I wouldn't pre-pot a trash pull, but only if the trash pull is like some neutrals or a really tiny one where damage doesn't matter and you're just waiting for something to come up. Like the neutrals you kill in between RP events and freehold, I wouldn't really pot those. It's kind of a waste of your pot where you could just save it for the pull on the boss coming right after.
Yeah, I also only pot if it's score. That's
Do you really?
No,
is that actually a rule of thumb?
I press my pre-pot bind quite a lot, but half the time I'm out of potions, and I only restock my potions if it's going to be score. So
Really?
okay, it's a roundabout way of getting to that point. Yeah.
I potion generally if it's above like a 21 or so, 21 to 22 range.
I try to remember to restock my potions, but I've run out of them so fast, man.
I actually feel
'cause
guilty.
People last their potions too.
Anytime I don't pot, even like a slightly lower key than cutting edge for me, I feel bad. So I just always pot. I just make sure I always do.
Now, don't wait for potions. Do not wait 5
Oh,
seconds for pre-pots to pull bosses. Stop that.
Okay,
Yeah.
group potion usage, like for all 5 players to use it, is like a second and a half or something. Just a very trivial time save on a full 5-person group usage. That's why whenever people complain about having an invis pot, I'm just like, get the fuck out of here with that shit. Just to press it and let's go.
It's true. I think it's only worth waiting 5 or 6 seconds if, one, the boss has a really important damage check that you have to meet quickly, like the Sisters boss and Waycrest used to be until they fixed it this patch. Or, man, there was another one, but it's escaping. If there's something really important, you need like a little extra damage.
True. That's a good
Should we
example,
wait for
Charles. Thank you.
food buffs ever after the key starts if the timer is still live? No.
No.
The answer is no. People are going to stop and wait though. But in terms of time efficiency,
It is
you
not
can
worth
get
10
that-
seconds to get your food buff.
that-
It is worth
the
a
fish
second and
feast.
a half to have the fish feast buff. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
That's
fine.
it. Yeah.
This is the only one that you're allowed to grab, bro.
And it's fine. Like, if your healer needs to eat, just start the pull while they're eating. They'll be fine. Except for the last boss, because that pulls them out of... If you're pulling that with an obelisk, it pulls them out of their eat animation. So, you gotta be careful of that.
Yep.
Hummus Goat asks, at Trelsky, how does spamming rage to get avatar back work? Shouldn't you be maximizing rage generation at all time? Yes, let us turn to our protection warrior expert here. TTB tells Trelsky.
Yeah. Dettles, go ahead.
Kalab has been benched for a hot minute, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
Stratos XD actually did a 19 yesterday, timed. Siege Borealis tanking his prot warrior, no big deal.
Nice.
Okay,
Time.
so Dratnos, tell us about spamming rage.
21 deaths, but timed.
My
Charles.
Trust has been benched for 2 months, but I do have a lot of knowledge about Prot Warriors. Yeah, you do want to spam rage all the time to get Avatar back, but only if you're about to cap. Like, you don't want to just run out of rage at any given moment because, one, you want rage to be able to keep the next shield block up. You want like a bank of 20 to 30 rage at minimum. And two, you never know when you might need like an emergency ignore pain. So you don't ever want to just hit 0.
So, if you're about to cap rage, would you rather revenge or would you rather overcap IP? Because ignore pain has like a pandemic shielding window where if you're below 30% on the ignore pain shield, you can get 130% of the shield. But if you're above it, then you're effectively overcapping the shield, and like the cutoff is the 30% mark. So if you're at 50%, you press IP, you're not going to get that bonus, that extra 20% of the shield that you'd be missing. Would you revenge at that point, or what would you do?
I'm hitting IP
Unless you're
there.
literally taking no damage, you always choose ignore pain.
Okay.
Like you never want to cap on rage because you want the CDR. You want full CDR from your rage spending. And two, even if you're going to cap your IP again, it's still more healing rather than a tiny bit more damage because you'll just keep refreshing the maximum amount of IP so that you stay at full health, basically.
Also,
And
Revenge Classic Global and IP does not, and your global, you want to use them globals on rage generation.
Yeah, the fact that it's off GCD is really actually like a big part of that. That's just like the filler that you use to stop yourself from capping rage.
That's fair. I just didn't really notice I was asking.
Yeah, that's
All right, that gets us through our question time here, and our show has reached the hour and 30-minute mark, so I think that's probably a pretty good place to call it here. Hope you guys have enjoyed
Again,
this episode.
Check out our Twitter. We are going to be posting a giveaway at some point.
In
once
like 5
we
days,
get the-
probably, yeah.
Yeah, once we get the details kind of squared away. Beyond that, we are also going back to Saturdays. Remember those two things.
Yep, not this Saturday, of course, because this Saturday is the last MDI weekend. Next week's show will be on Saturday instead of the Wednesday, and that is the plan for that. check out the MDI though; it's gonna be fun. The last NA Cup should be cool to watch.
I'm so pumped.
And check out TTV Trelsky for Push Week keys. Pretty sweet. Welcome our friend back to the streaming world. All right, that's gonna be it for our show though. Bye everybody.
Later.